Okay, good. Questions? We will start with James. Oh.
Dr. Gill, I was wondering, you often speak about a relapse for the person and how you don't start from, you don't have to restart everything if you relapse. My expectation is, though, that if I relapse in a family situation, isn't that going to make it much more difficult for the other people to continue on with the process? If I relapse, well, I can continue on and not feel that badly about myself. But if I relapse and they're involved, which they will be, isn't that going to be much more significant for them during this process? Because once again, they've lost their trust in me. They're not going to see it the same way as I will, and I might have to start from scratch with those people. Is that the case, or does relapse affect them more than me?
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's a great question. So the question really cuts to the core of why. So I say this often: 1 to 3 years. That's just my experience. 1 to 3 years is typically how long it takes for people to really build confidence that something is real when it has not been for 20 years. So it can be more, it can be less. If everyone starts doing their work, it's a lot less. If no one does their work, it's a lot more. So where does relapse fit into this? So there's a reason why this is 1 to 3 years, not after the person seeks help, 1 to 3 years after they start getting sober. So whatever their thing is, if it's gambling, if it's alcohol, if it's cocaine, or whatever the addiction is, once they've dropped that, after that is when the system will begin to examine itself. The reason for that is because when this person is red hot, and it's just crisis after crisis, hospital after hospital, everyone is walking on eggshells. Everyone's living in a very frightful place. So they're all very amygdalar. Because they're all very amygdalar, the relapsing has to stop. The relapsing has to stop, at least to the alcohol or substances or gambling. But the thing is that the disease is not about alcohol. The problem here is about stress and a system that's geared towards maximum stress applied to one point, which is guaranteed to stretch it and break it like a chain link. And so when you have relapse in the midst of that, it takes a long time to build the trust. The trust is broken instantaneously. One occurrence can be enough to break trust. And so on the addicted person's side, they need to understand that relapse, even a little bit, is not acceptable, especially if they have a long history. It's realistic, it happens, but there's a big cost to it. You have to understand that these families, systems, have become used to viewing you in a certain way, and they'll very quickly go back to that. It takes a long period of stability for the system to start looking at themselves. A lot of times, by this point, this person is actually far healthier than anyone else in that family system. They have a more stress tolerance, they have more patience, they're oftentimes more functional. The others may not see that, they may not know that, but that's my assessment when I understand the system. And so, when you relapse in the midst of that, it resets the clock. You know, in yoga, we oftentimes do like like 40-day meditations. It's a great thing to do. Say it's said 40 days of continuous practice of anything is what it takes to break a habit. And so if you miss a day, you got to start the 40 again. So oftentimes, I remember my first 40-day practice actually took me about 90 days because I missed a couple. So that's oftentimes what it is with family systems. So on the patient side, the addicted person side, relapse carries a high risk because the distrust is restored very quickly. Trust is built up slowly. Relapse happens. So one of the ways in which families can heal a lot faster is if everyone understands that. It is a brain condition. A person with addiction, an addiction is addiction equals stress-induced defect of the midbrain, which deals with reward circuitry. That's what addiction is. It's real. We can see it on brain scans. A little part of the brain gets a bit bigger, some control parts of the frontal cortex get a bit smaller. All of a sudden, with a bit of stress, some activity becomes very likely to do, even though it's very destructive. It's the reality. If someone's been drinking a long time, if they have certain genetics, their brain is very likely to do this. So relapse will happen. And if the family resets the clock in their mind, oh, he hasn't changed at all, that's not true. He's changed lots. He slipped. But if there's compassion, if these people build a relationship of compassion with that person will terminate and stop the slips a lot faster. And so this is another reason why we like to work with families. Because stopping the slips and before it becomes a full-blown relapse. Because remember, addiction is stress-induced. So a person is sober for 6 months. Dad gets sick. Stress. Drink. And now the wife lays it on. You haven't changed. Look at what you did. Look at what you've done to our kids, or this, or that. He drinks more. Stress induced. It's neurobiology. If the family is wise, they understand that. Instead of laying that on them, they'll say, hey, why don't we go to an AA meeting? That's why I say with full confidence of science, I say if families work with me, we reduce the time it takes to achieve robust recovery by like 80%. That's how powerful this pressure cooker is. And humans are social animals. We exist in social environments. Energetically, man and a woman, husband and wife are connected. No one has the ability to make each other as happy or as miserable as a husband and a wife. And so that relationship is central to recovery. And if it's characterized by a lot of hurt and it's not getting better, then that's why people separate. And I'm a big fan of families recovering together. I'm a big fan of communities looking after communities. I'm a big fan of therapeutic community of being, and that's ultimately what we have to go towards. Family systems need to become therapeutic communities of being, which is where everyone's working on themselves, everyone has a self-therapy practice, and everyone coaches each other on their self-therapy practice. Self-therapy is connect to self, connect to others, and commit to daily practice. And the communication is characterized by coaching. If you can achieve that, or even a little bit of that, you shorten this 1 to 3 year period by 80%. That's my experience. So, great question. I extended the question. Thank you for that. Other questions? Yes.
So, in that case, my is like vice versa. I'm thinking like, in this case, I'm not in my pressure cooker. I'm thinking my wife is in my pressure cooker because it's like I'm feeling like I'm in new married in my on my home because I live on student permit. I was in Canada. Then I got married. My wife lived with my parents for 1 year. Then they all came in over here. So then they didn't tell anything direct to me. So my wife's always doctor between them. So sometimes my wife tell everything. Sometimes he hide. Maybe he afraid to tell me something. So in my home, my parents always blame. Kids did that. Every time blame on even me. Like so even small things. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. He didn't drink water. Even small things. Even very little for everyone. And another thing.
And what's the question?
The question is like, it's totally different in a different way.
And that, I will tell you, is not true. So, it's always that way. Now, what you're saying is very true. I focus today primarily on the alcohol. The wife, absolutely. How can you be the center of all this and not be in a pressure cooker? It's just, a lot of times, women, they have better coping mechanisms. But two, if your husband is an alcoholic who hasn't worked in a long time or doesn't work much or whatever, and she has to work 2 jobs, or she has to look after the kids, or she has to do things, and she's getting all this communication, and she can't really talk her heart to her husband, because anytime she does that, he drinks more, or I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking generally.
One more question.
I will come to it. So the thing is that she's in her own pressure cooker. Yeah. And when she's in the pressure cooker, that just means that her amygdala is firing. She is surviving. She's not living. And people say to me all the time, where did the time go? We've been married 25 years. And that's where it goes. When you're living in survival, from the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep, the years will pass very quick. Because the amygdala only thinks about the next seconds, minutes, and hours. And so it's very easy to pass years. The reality of this is actually everyone's in a pressure cooker. What dad likes to watch? What father likes to watch all of this go through? They all know what's happening. They don't know what to do about it, but they know it's not good. That's why there's a lot of secrets. That's why families don't talk about each other. They keep it hush hush. Everyone's in a pressure cooker. Mom's in a pressure cooker. Dad's in a pressure cooker. Everyone's in a pressure cooker. So the people who are in the worst pressure cooker are the ones who say, I don't have a problem, I'm fine. If you're a saint, maybe. But saints have a very powerful self-therapy practice. So they can be in that and be serene. So the point is I will say it's not true. Yeah. You're in a pressure cooker and so is she.
Yeah.
you respond differently. And women, oftentimes, there's a study, there's lots of studies. Boys get diagnosed with ADHD a lot more frequently, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, at a greater rate than girls. Because boys just generally act bad. A lot of times women act out, but their acting out is under the radar. So you can't tell. They're stressed out, but it looks like they're just talking to friends. Gossiping, shopping, eating. It doesn't look bad, but it has the same effect, which is conflict is not being resolved as it arrives. Is being pushed down into the subconscious garbage can, and over time it's building. And as it builds, it will corrupt her communication, because communication is 99% nonverbal. So your subconscious is what you project. And if your subconscious is really heavy, really dirty, it doesn't matter what you say. You will have a downward negative communication. And you'll attract that kind of person, or you'll be alone. So, thank you. Other questions?
Yeah.
We'll come back to. Yes, go ahead.
I really like it. First of all, it's great the way you described it. Now, if a family, just a quick question: if a family is willing to come here, to sit down and kind of go over this, how do you do that? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so two parts to that question. So a lot of times we get a lot of people coming in. A lot of times it's they want to talk about the issues, but really they just want to learn about this person. They just want to what's he telling you? We just want to make sure he's not lying to you. Yeah. and it's all about this person and their bad activity. And so what they're doing is they're trying to engage the provider, in this case NOM, but anyone, family doctor, right? They're trying to engage them in a rescuer position. And that's generally not going to go anywhere good. So the first question is do they really? And what's the motivation? That's very important. And so a lot of times families get upset with us for not sharing a lot of information about the person. Because ultimately, diffusing this big bomb has very little to do with this person. If this person is in front of me, we work with that. If this person's in front of me, if it's dad, then we have to talk to dad about dad. And just like an alcoholic, oftentimes early on they're drinking and they don't think they have a problem. They think they're fine. They think that you have the problem. Drama, people who are in drama oftentimes don't have an awareness that they're a part of it. And until that awareness comes, that's what we have to work on. And so we work on that, and we work on addiction as a stress-induced defect of the midbrain and reward circuitry. So the awareness is the first thing. How do they slowly over time, we teach families a lot of the same things, like how to de-stress themselves. If they're in a charged conversation, how do they, instead of, let's say dad argues with the son, instead of dad then spreading it all over the network, making it worse, instead of that, we have to teach dad to do some tapping, do something to calm himself down. That's a journey. Just like it's a journey for this person, it's a journey for that person. the one advantage is if these people don't have a lot of drinking, their brains learn things a little bit faster. But they're not as desperate to learn. So then they learn slower. So it oftentimes is a lot slower. How does someone want to do that? They just have to call us. You have our intake forms, and then we just connect with them directly. So we generally avoid connecting with. So if generally organizations like ours, we avoid connecting with these people through the alcoholic or through the person with the addiction, because that person that oftentimes plays into the drama. But if the person gives us consent, then we verify that they're actually interested. And a lot of times we find that sometimes they are interested. Sometimes they're just like, that person just needs to get a grip, send him back to us when he's better. Not that interested. And so then that's but even that, there's opportunities to work with. So you just, any family can just call NAM, and the person with the addiction doesn't even have to come here. One thing we don't do. This is a subject of a separate talk actually, but I'll give you a little. One thing that we will avoid doing. So there's 3 levels of communication, or 3 strategies. So the first strategy is open, i.e. Addicted person plus family member are present in the room talking together. And then there is, and it's calm. So that's the ideal. The ideal is when everyone's sitting together talking calm. Oftentimes not where we start, because it's messy. But that's ideal. That's the first strategy. Second strategy is open. Addicted plus family members, angry. So that's when the addicted person sitting there, family sitting there, there's tension, there's anger. When it comes to sharing information, and then the last one is closed. Family member only. This is all like with NAM, let's say. So the thing is that we get a lot of people who want to talk to us just to give us information about their family members who have the addiction. What they don't understand is that trust goes down. So a lot of times folks, they come to us, they say, he gets really upset when we say these things, so we want to speak to you separately. It's very important for families to understand that this closed creates paranoia and distrust. In people who are already substance, especially if they use stimulants, they're predisposed to paranoia and distrust. And so oftentimes families don't realize it, but when they approach us and we engage in that drama and we listen and we hear, that relationship will become weaker between NAM and that patient. And so why do we do it? Because we do it. The number one reason for this is when safety is at risk. Safety is suicidal, homicidal, child at risk. When these things are happening, we would love to hear from families directly, because then I get on the phone with child services. if the risk is real. I call the police if the risk of homicide is real, and I certify the person and send them to the hospital if the risk of suicide is real. All of which destroy my relationship with that person. And so it's unlikely I'll be able to do a lot of good therapy with that person. If that's... Families don't understand that, so I try to help them understand that when you approach someone secretly, the main reason to do that is when safety is at risk. Otherwise, it's better that you do it open and the person's angry. At the very least, they know what is being said about them. Open and angry is better than closed and calm. Because remember, communication is 99% nonverbal. Even though you haven't told them that you have gone behind their back, at some level they know. And it corrodes, it keeps us from helping that person. Because there's a trust issue. And then on the addicted person's side, our job with them is to say, hey, we're on your side. We're on everyone's side. We're not about sharing information about family with you or about you with family. Our only interest is diffusing the big bomb so that everyone can have a peaceful life. That has nothing to do with finding out who said what when and who hurt who and who's sleeping with who. Who the heck cares? At least I don't. Sorry. But we get this all the time. When families want to meet us, they oftentimes want this. They want to give us information. And that actually, there's a small category where that's a good idea, such as when there's safety at risk. A lot of times they just want to, just so you know, he's drinking. When we're in the business of being lied to every day, many times a day, we know at some level. It's relatively unnecessary to let us know things like that. And if so, do it with them present. It will preserve the relationship a lot faster. The less you talk about people in their absence, the better your relationship will be, one-to-one. Common agenda. This idea of calm but closed, it creates drama triangles everywhere. It's a disease. This style of communication for non-crisis things is a disease to a family system. And so that's the thing to keep in mind. So I thank you for that. Additional questions? I'll take one or two more. So I know we have one over there, but any others before we get to them? It's okay if not, or comments. Okay, last question to you.
It's not about something on stress. It's like when I'm stressed out, I didn't drink. I start to meditation, like do something. When I'm very, very stressed out, didn't do anything, then I take some drug to take medicine and to calm down myself. And like when I'm stressed out, I just do driving and listening high music and do shopping. What I do shopping, like find deals.
And what's the question?
It's like about stress.
So the number one issue with stress, and there's lots of videos on stress on the YouTube. Please watch them.
It's like
the number one thing about stress is you're never as stressed out as you think you are. You're usually a lot more stressed than you think you are. Usually people who think that they are like 3 out of 10, in reality they're more like an 8 out of 10, because they've been living in this pressure cooker for such a long time. They've lost sensitivity to stress, and so they think, I'm not stressed out, I'm thinking with my frontal cortex. But they're mistaken, and that's dangerous, because when they get to a 10, they bad things happen. They think they're at 3, so they have lots of time. Oh yeah, I'll know. But they don't know. And so then they get surprised when all of a sudden they're there and it's a big mess, arguments, drinking, drugging, whatever. What happened? And they blame.
I do gardening, housework, cleaning cars.
That
I
sounds
do
very,
everything
very,
when
that sounds very nice.
I do organize everything, kitchen, laundry, all.
And I
done
think
when-
if there's no other question, we can stop there for today.
That's it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Many thank yous for you and for all of you that were listening to the second segment on families.